Hello, good afternoon, Taiwo.
Good afternoon, Sarah.
My name is Sarah, and I work with the Living Archives Project, where we are collecting stories of how COVID-19 impacted various communities in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. Today is December 19th, 2022, and this week there were 152 reported cases of COVID-19 in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, which shows a slight increase of 17% over the last 2 weeks. Since we are both virtual, each of us is comfortable not wearing a mask. Taiwo, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Taiwo Jaiyeoba. I am the city manager for the city of Greensboro. I've been here now for about 11 months, but prior to me coming here, I was planning director and assistant city manager for the city of Charlotte. I am an African-American male, and I love North Carolina.
I love it. Taiwo, how long have you been in North Carolina?
I've been in North Carolina since 2015. I came from Georgia.
From Georgia.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And man, how you were assistant city manager for Charlotte
Yes.
for how long?
I was assistant city manager and planning director from 2018
Okay.
until January of 2022.
Wow. That's amazing. 3 years.
Yes.
Wow. Almost four. Almost
For
4 years.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
do you have a family in North Carolina?
Yes. I have my family here and they love it. We have kids who go to University of North Carolina in Charlotte, University of North Carolina in Greensboro, and High Point University. And so, yeah,
That's
um,
amazing.
yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank you.
today and for sharing your story with us. Um, I would love to just start off and ask for you to describe your experience over the last 2 years with the COVID-19 pandemic.
When it first hit us, we all thought it was going to be short-lived. We started talking about coming back to work in 3 months, coming back to work in 6 months. At that time, long-term thinking for us was 6 months. Let's plan for how we're going to come back to the office. But gradually, and at the same time, quickly realizing that this may not actually turn out the way we thought it might be. This might actually be um, um, an event that could leave a permanent mark on the way we do everything. And so we had to quickly make a peak. I think personally for me, it wasn't so difficult living in a virtual world because I've been a consultant prior to joining the city. And as a consultant, you're going to use Skype, which was what we used in those days to communicate with clients or
Yeah.
video conferencing. Um, so making that transition from in-person to virtual platform wasn't that much of a big deal as an individual. But what was different though, however, was this having to connect with residents, not just
Mm.
one video conferencing with one or two people, but now you're talking about community members who have no access to digital platform, had no way to connect with you. And I felt I felt that prior to COVID, people mistrusted government. Now, with COVID, people even mistrusted us even more because they felt behind that screen, what exactly are they talking about? What exactly are they doing? And I also felt to an extent invisible because you had to wear your mask. And so
Mm.
people could see your eyes, but they really, especially if you were someone who wasn't able to visualize people talking, it made it very difficult for our disabled members of the community to even know what you were saying because you were hiding behind this mask. So I felt that there was a disconnect between us and the community. And because a lot of what we did as a planner and as also a city administration, especially myself, was connecting with community, I felt very disconnected. I thought you could only have access to people who could talk to you by Zoom or by project team or by whatever other platform was there at that time. But what about the other members of the community, especially the Black and Brown community and those who live on the lower level of the social income who could not afford to get on those. So there was a sense of hollowness in me, so to speak. And I thought there should be a way to re-engage the community. I kind of was thinking about that on a day-to-day basis, especially as things got worse. 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and buildings were still vacant, streets were empty, and you just got to find ways by which you could engage. And then to add to that was George Floyd as well. So it kind of compounded the situation. And those who had been keeping away because of the impact of COVID came out because of the desire to achieve social justice. And so you now saw these two things almost like colliding. Should we stay behind the screen? But there's only so much activism you could do behind the screen. And so it was important to find a platform by which people could get out and do it safely while they continue to protest. So I had my wife and my children got out on the streets, had posters, got into the park, took a march, took a knee, and did everything that we could do to make sure that we did not allow COVID-19 to prevent us from participating in the message around social justice, especially how Black and brown people and minorities were being treated in our country. So in a nutshell, it was an unusual and unreal time that we are still now, 2 years later, we're still reeling from the effects of it. We have not totally recovered, and I'm not sure we will fully recover. So I keep saying we are recovering. I don't believe there's anything like post-COVID-19. I think we're still recovering, but we are also developing innovative ways by which we can do things better and live in the reality we have found ourselves.
Very, very, very true. What do you think are some ways that the community got involved during that time? What are some ways that they were able to connect?
I felt that there were members of the community who could communicate to us, sending us emails, or even making phone calls. And I think, I'm not sure that, so I joined the city of Charlotte in 2018, and COVID-19 really hit us in early 2020 as a city. I would say that the number of handwritten letters that I got between 2018 and 2020 were maybe, on one hand, I could count them. But the number of handwritten letters that I got once COVID hit, within a span of 6 months, were a lot, because there were members of the community who still wanted to be able to convey a lot of their thoughts and frustrations and concerns, and maybe in some instances, compliments about some of the work we were doing, and they had no access to the internet, or they were not even sure that I was at work enough to be able to even read their emails. And so they resorted to writing letters. You have to decipher the writings, be able to see what some of our members of the community were saying. We had to come up with some ideas. For example, we were working on the comprehensive plan, and at that time we were releasing the first draft of the Charlotte Future Comprehensive Plan. Then we knew the community wanted to engage. So what we did was to do a drive-in movie theater style engagement, where we actually went out in the community and had a translation on a particular radio station that people could sit in their vehicles and still be able to hear the message, whether it was in English or otherwise.
Wow, that's really
It was
cool.
kind of creative. I think we had over 500 people who participated. So one thing that was very obvious to me was pre-COVID or during COVID, the community wanted to continue to participate in governance. And they just had to look for creative ways to do it, whether it was going back to old-fashioned letter writing, or pretty much state calling your landline, or just texting or emailing, or if they run into you in the store or in the public, they come to you and talk. So community members were reeling with impact of the COVID-19 and the unknown, and so it was good. In a way that we were still able to find means of connecting with them. We created virtual classrooms for those who had access to the internet, where we could still communicate with people, and especially your employees who were feeling very disconnected, and our residents and small business owners. And so projects continued. We didn't expect to stop. People expected us maybe slow down a little bit during the pandemic, but you knew that slowing down will also mean that if cost will only increase with time if you slow down. And so how do you balance the expectations with the demands and balancing it with reality? So, but one thing that was obvious to me was the community did not relent on their desire to continue to participate in governance.
That really shows such a uniqueness and beautiful community here that Charlotte has.
Yes.
They're very involved, and they can, even in the midst of the chaos, they can be resilient and creative.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that during this time was also the George Floyd movement and all of these protests, and you talked about having and giving community members a platform. What did that look like?
For me personally, I can't call myself an activist as much. When I was a university student, I was an activist. I was a student representative, not only for my department, but for my faculty then back in Nigeria. But I constantly, during the George Floyd movement, I imagined myself that I was George Floyd. What would my family go through seeing what I went through or what I was going through? How will my kids, see themselves if they were in the situation? And I realized that as an African American male who has, been blessed with a position, being an assistant city manager or a planning director, you have to ask yourself, as an administrator, what should your role be in working with the community to help emphasize the voices that were normally not at the table when policies are being made and when decisions are being made. So I think that at that point in time, the activist part of me came out, and I started looking for ways by which I could participate in what was going on. So the Black Lives Matter mural on Trade Street, and Tryon Street, actually, in Charlotte, was the outcome of that, because I just got on Twitter and I asked the question, what if we artify, ARTIFY, which was a word I made up, what if we artify the intersection between Tryon and trade with Black Lives Matter? I just thought that would create a hub for people to gather. We were having protests after protests. Now, maybe we need to create a sacred ground where residents, law enforcement, government folks like myself could gather together and just heal. So it was just a Twitter. I didn't expect that it would lead to what it finally became. It was just a tweet. And so I'm not an artist, and I'm not an activist either, but I wanted to be part of that and create an opportunity for people to express their voice. So the artist and the art and creative community, I should call it, in Charlotte, just
No, I think I lost you, Taiwo. Hello? I lost you. You're back. That's okay. So you cut off by saying the artist, and then that's all I heard.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say the art community, the creative community in Charlotte rose up to the occasion.
Okay.
Just say where and when. How do we do this work? I was thinking more of placemaking. How do you create a colorful place on Tryon Street? And so in our placemaking budget, we had some money, and we decided that we were going to support some of the artists who wanted to do something, because we were thinking already the creative community was suffering during COVID-19. And so this was one way of meaningfully engaging and employing them, while at the same time creating a voice for the voiceless. So within a space of ours, the Black Lives Matter mural was created. It was organic. It wasn't planned. We did not sit down to meet with anyone to figure out how this was going to be done. All I did was to make a clarion call, and people responded to it. And I was shocked by the response and how this whole thing came forward. I went to the site a number of times, saw people getting married, saw people taking graduation pictures, saw people come with their families. I saw a gentleman who said he was in his 70s and he never. I'm sorry.
No, take a minute.
He said, I've lived in this community all my life. I never expected to see this on Main Street in Tryon. And I'll never forget. I don't know him from anywhere. He did not even know I was involved in any way, shape, or form. We were just next to each other on Tryon Street when he said that, and he was wiping his eyes. And I thought, wow. You know, if you had to make a statement of how people who had lost hope could all of a sudden find their hope rekindled, or people who felt that they had no voice, they'd been marginalized. And this was a way by which we would engage. And like I always said at that time, that the message was on the street. It was really bringing people who had not been used to being on Main Street, bring them to Main Street. Because when you think about Tryon, that's where we have our biggest bank buildings. That's the corporate nerve of Charlotte. To think about young African-American kids riding their bicycle on this mural, coming there to eat, some just coming to sit down and hang out. They would never have been there without this mural to even see what it was like. So I thought that was, in a small way, a contribution to how you bring people out during the pandemic. Again, that confluence at the intersection between the pandemic and George Floyd's death resulted in this, and it brought people out. One of my favorite pictures was really seeing people kneeling down with their fist raised. Or one of our police officers talking to one of the artists, and they were just engaged in a really wonderful conversation that had nothing to do with, you know, violence or anything of that sort. It was just really nice. I thought it was a healing ground. It was a sacred spot. So I could go on and on and on about, you know, how we ended up blocking the street, you know, for like 6 months. You know, it wasn't a perfect process, but the message went through, that it wasn't just a symbol, but it was substantive enough to let people who had been marginalized know that they also matter.
Wow. I'm just getting chills by you talking about that, you know?
I still get emotional every time I think about it.
Yeah. And you said something so beautiful, giving a voice for the voiceless, and just making people feel heard and feel seen and feel valued.
Yes,
That
exactly.
is so beautiful.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because each letter, with the exception of one, each letter was painted by an artist, and there was one letter that was a combination of two artists at $500 a piece. Even though that didn't seem like much, through our placemaking grant, we provided the paint, and we were able to issue this support to our community artists. I believe that out of that, a number of those artists ended up going to do bigger and better things. You know, because they were known, they had their signatures, and people came, they interviewed them. I like to think that that was the launch pad for a number of our community artists. People don't often realize the impact that bad economy, bad health situation, whatever it may be, the artist community sometimes is often the most directly impacted first. Because even in a good economy, artists struggle. I know, because my daughter went to school to study art, so I have an artist daughter. And so even in the best of economy, artists struggle. And so it was really a small way of really helping our creative community to step forward and get engaged in the process. And hopefully, it resulted in something that they can be proud of, for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So once they had to get the street back up and running, what happened?
So the street got back up open, right? And the mirror was there for like 6 months. We had to protect it because obviously there were people who did not like the message of the, and I think that maybe a couple of days or so after it was installed, somebody drove on it just to kind of damage it. And so it's redone, and then we blocked the street. The goal was to create a pedestrian-only environment, where restaurants could actually pull out their tables and chairs for people to come and sit out on the streets while people are also having a wonderful time in this short block. And so we were only able to do it for 6 months. And once the street became open, obviously people drove on it and the paint wore off. But again, that's the symbolic part of it. Symbols come to an end, as we know. But the substantive part of it, which was the message that it conveyed about the fact that you should attach values to Black lives. It lives on in the lives of people who came there to take pictures, which they will memorialize for the rest of their lives. I mean, the whole story followed me here to Greensboro, where I came as a city manager, and there were people who met me, who's never met me before in their lives, and they said, "Of course, heard about you because of the Black Lives Matter mural in Charlotte," because Greensboro also had installed its own mural, a couple of murals actually, in its downtown at that particular point in time. What made this particular mural very interesting was that and I don't know how many people noticed this, but the NBA All-Star game that was going to be in Charlotte actually took a shot of this mural, and it was part of the image they displayed, marketing and announcing the NBA All-Star game in Charlotte. So again, while the symbol might have faded with time, the message continues to live in the hearts and minds of people. But it also says something to me that when you, as a government official, especially if you're an African American like myself, when you have kind of got to a point in your career, you use your position as a position of influence in a right way to help those who have been marginalized really feel that they are being heard. Equity is not just a word to me. It's actually something that I want to live by, the creed of equity, that, you give people what they need. You don't give everybody the same thing. You meet people where they are. You're fair and you're just. And so for me, that was very important. And I also believe that government has a responsibility and a role in making sure that those who have been disenfranchised, those who have been marginalized, can be brought into the mainstream of our conversations around policies, are brought back into the conversations around values, brought back into the conversations around how do you want your city, your streets to be shaped? How do you want your urban spaces to be designed? You design streets and the environment based on people who use them, not based on you who designed them.
Yeah.
And it really was, to me, an opportunity to get a lot of people more involved. Were there people who disagreed? Absolutely, yes. There were a lot of people who still, are mad that whole thing took place, because it was not something they expected to happen. But by and large, the majority felt that it was something that was needed at that point in time. And hopefully, as we grow into our future, we raise a generation of leaders who will not be afraid to step forward and do the right thing when the moment calls for it.
Speak that truth, Taiwo. I love that. Oh man. If you could sum up the message, I know you said some really amazing gold nuggets, through your few minutes, but if you could sum up what you want the message to be, what would you say?
I would say the message has to be around the influence, the power of influence that we all possess, that we sometimes don't know until somebody steps forward and, be the person that allows us the confidence to really express that influence. Each one of those artists had an influence. I've never met with a lot of them. As a matter of fact, I don't think I ever met with any of them prior to that. But they were all influential in the community, so to speak. But influence without a voice is, is frustrating. And so I felt that, you know, when I think about it, I thought they were able to influence a lot of us through one letter a piece because each letter had a message in it. And I also felt that at the same time, the community, by embracing it, also wanted to send a message that, yes, while George Floyd might have, been killed by a law enforcement officer who obviously does not represent everyone in law enforcement, that the message lives on in terms of Black lives do matter. As a matter of fact, every minority life matters. And we got to make sure that the influence that resides in the minority community is brought alive, whether it is in affordable housing provision. Because when you think about it, housing affordability, homelessness, the challenge with transportation, the usage with public transit, when you look at the people who struggle the most with these challenges, they're usually in the minority community. And so how do we make sure that we address those things? Because when you do, you actually expand your influence beyond that community to everyone else. Because if you can meet the needs of the most vulnerable, whether it's the disabled, whether it's the uneducated, if you can really take care of the vulnerable in your community, you will be able to meet the rest of the needs of the community. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
So if I have to summarize that message, it's really the power of influence and understanding that if someone has a voice and they are willing to step forward, people will be able to express their influence through that one voice.
Yeah. Wow. And the way that you influence Charlotte through the just support and creation and kind of just the spark, the light bulb for the mural is amazing. Taiwo. So thank you. Thank you for influencing the city and for leaving such an incredible legacy just from those 6 months of showcasing this beautiful mural.
Appreciate that. I think that when we think about it over and over and over, we have to consider the fact that, the message itself on the street might have faded, but we have to make sure that the message of equity stays in our hearts, it stays in our minds, so that policies related to business recruitment, business retention, policies related to business expansion, policies relating to affecting housing or whatever, climate change, whatever those policies may be, equity has to be at the core of every policy of every city, of every town, of every village, because until we do that and we acknowledge it, we're not walking the talk.
Yeah, I 100% support that.
Yeah.
How would you say that the last 2 years has shaped you as a person?
It has, in many ways. I would say that I did not really have the luxury of working from home as much because as one of the members of the leadership team, we were constantly there. The city, the manager was there, and when your boss is there, the mayor is there, you have to be there to make sure that you provide support. One of the things that he did for me was to be able to see up close how, some of our elected officials really was, looking for ways by which we could constantly implement and do things for our community members. Because Now you couldn't even sit around the table. You had to engage with them virtually, meeting with them one on one. I was able to see up close how passionate they were about things that we needed to do for our community members. Secondly, for me, was also the whole, I'd, I'd known about the digital divide prior to COVID-19, but it did not really hit me how bad it was, uh, especially for Black and Brown communities until COVID-19. And that actually, I was able to listen and to hear from those who are experts of how much we have to invest in our digital infrastructure if we're going to be able to bridge that divide between those who have and those who don't, and the resources needed. Um, and then finally, for me, was the closeness, frankly speaking, that it brought to me and my family. Because a lot of people, of course, we couldn't go to many places. And so recreation was needed desperately. And so we would take walks. Kids who are not going to school, you know, we couldn't travel to many places because they were either closed and so many restaurants were not open. So we took walks. We had opportunities to do a lot of things together, build puzzle pieces, assemble trains at home, Legos, and all of that. And the closeness that it just brought, I think, was also very healing for us. And I don't know how other families adapted during that period, but I tell you, it was something that allowed us to really find ourselves, recreate, spend our weekends not watching TV, but really getting out because people wanted to get out. And so we would go out. Since there were no restaurants to go to and there were no amusement parks to visit, we just took walks. And it was fun, walking the dog, hanging out. It was just, and you got to know your neighbors, people you didn't see for a long time. So it really was, the community became very small quickly. While it became really huge over the virtual platform, in person, it was very small, and you got to observe a lot of people up close. And we came to appreciate a lot more things.
Definitely came to appreciate a lot of the simple things that we forget to appreciate. To respect your time and to honor you, Taiwo, I just want to follow up with one more question, and is, do you have any additional stories or experiences that you would like to share with us?
One of the things that I like to really talk about, especially when it comes to men like myself, who and I'm speaking especially to Black males now, who are in positions of influence. It's not to shy away from getting the message across, whether you're a budget director, or you are a city manager, or you are the person hired over planning or public transportation, managing those things. We have very few of us who have the privilege of being in these positions. Let's use it well. One of those ways that we could use it very well is to re-examine some of the policies that were developed way before our time, that were developed, not considering equity and not necessarily considering, doing the right things, and taking a good look at those policies, re-examining them, and making sure that we retool them. One of the things that occurred to me quickly during the pandemic, frankly speaking, was how people came to think inwardly, and it was really more self-preservation for a lot of us at that point in time, rather than using the pandemic as an opportunity to take a step back, look around us at where we currently lack, and how can we make sure that we, begin to retool our policies for the future. And so I really would like us to do that, consistently. I also happen to be a father of girls, so I'm a girl dad, and I know how important it is to make sure that during the pandemic, there's a lot of my colleagues who were either single mothers or even married, and just needed to have the flexibility to look after their children. I feel that we need to think about what the future of work looks like. You know, building flexibility into our work lives, our work system, our work program. People can still be productive even when they are not there in person. How do we make sure we build flexibility? Especially there are those who do not earn enough income. And if we can build flexibility into their work schedule, it allows them to be able to save on certain things while at the same time they can maintain their family structure, especially as they raise their kids. This affects especially minority community. And leaders like me have to think about those things and make sure that we accommodate everyone. You know, again, like I said, you can't give everyone the same thing. You have to meet people where they are. It's about being fair and it's about being just. I believe at the end of the day, that's what equity means.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for just being honest and authentic and real. And I just really appreciate you. I really appreciate your experience and all of the words of wisdom that you shared with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for reaching out to me. I appreciate that.
Yeah.